This question relates to the new specification for first examination in 2018. It starts with a table. Table 4 shows the percentage of carbon dioxide and oxygen in inhaled and exhaled air. Explain what causes the changes of gases in exhaled air compared with inhaled air in Table 4. Now, because it's asked us to explain, we need to talk about where the carbon dioxide has come from. So we're going to say that the carbon dioxide from respiration has moved from blood into air. Remember, in biology, we're always talking about where things move from and where they move to. We also need to say that oxygen moves from the air into blood for respiration. For the third mark, which is the mark that most students didn't achieve, we need to say that both gases move by diffusion. But that isn't enough. We need to say down a concentration gradient. Now, in the past, you might have thought it was enough to say that carbon dioxide from respiration diffuses from blood to air and that oxygen diffuses from the air into blood for respiration. But let's make a rule of thumb that if we're going to talk about gases moving by diffusion, let's add down a concentration gradient. And we're not just going to say along a concentration gradient because we don't know whether we're going against it or down it. Let's be specific. Let's be explicit. The next question says, most gas exchange surfaces have evolved with similar characteristics. Explain how the lungs are adapted for efficient gas exchange. To answer this question, we've got to explain it. So for each adaptation, we're going to explain it. So for example, many alveoli is an adaptation. Now let's explain it. They give a large surface area. In this question, for each mark, you needed to give the adaptation and the explanation. So because there are 4 marks, we need to give 4 adaptations. The first 2 were the ones that most students got. If you're looking for grades 7 to 9, you need to be able to come up with all 4. And the last 2 are the ones that most students struggle to give. But they are clearly Key Stage 4 concepts. The first 2 could be argued that you learnt about in Year 8 and there's no uplift at GCSE. So for our second mark, we're going to talk about thin alveoli walls. That's the adaptation, and the explanation is that the thin gives us a short diffusion pathway. The next one, we're going to talk about an efficient blood supply. And that's the adaptation. How that helps is that it maintains the concentration gradient because, of course, as oxygen moves into the blood, it's then moved away with deoxygenated blood taking its place, and therefore the concentration gradient is maintained. The mark that many students didn't get was the idea of continuous ventilation, i.e. that each time we take a breath, we're moving more oxygen in and again keeping the concentration gradient maintained. The next question includes a graph, and it's a graph like you might not have seen before. I say that because I haven't seen it before. I've even used this graph when I've been teaching my A-level students because it's so good to explain the concept of the counter-current system. Let's just read through the question quickly and then I'll explain why I like it so much. In fish, the gas exchange surface is the gills. Water passes over the gills and allows gas exchange between the fish and the water. The direction of flow of both water and blood through the gills allows a very high rate of gas exchange. Figure 10 shows the percentage saturation of oxygen in water at different points along the gills of a fish. So the reason why I like this graph so much is because with the countercurrent system, students can often become confused and think that the concentration in one medium is going to be at its highest when the concentration in the other medium is at its lowest, i.e. in this case, the oxygen in water might be really high, whereas the oxygen in the blood will be really low. And that's not the case. What we're showing here is that things are moving in opposite directions, but where one is low, for example, the oxygen in the blood is low, the oxygen in the water is also fairly low. However, it's still higher than the oxygen in the blood. So the concentration gradient is maintained over its length. The next part of the question asks, calculate the difference in the percentage oxygen between the blood and the water. A lot of students got this correct. And although it only required reading off a graph, students were careful enough to realise that the starting point wasn't 100, it was 99. So now we come to the question that relates to the graph. It says use information from figure 10 to explain how the exchange mechanism in the fish's gills maximises gas exchange between the fish and the water. So we needed to say that the direction of water flow is opposite to blood flow. This can also be described as the counter current flow. So oxygen concentration in the blood is always lower than in the water. This maintains the concentration gradient, which increases the rate of diffusion. Now, if you're after those higher grades, i.e. 7, 8, 9, please do review that graph. It's a really interesting graph and I think we're likely to see it again. Hope the video's been of use. Please leave me a comment.